something happened. Not in a press conference, not in a government statement. On a tarmac, in the dark, when nobody was supposed to be watching, Iran launched, and within hours, the most powerful military machine on Earth stopped standing by. What happened next? Most people will never see covered like this. Because this is not a story about missiles. This is a story about what happens when America decides it is done watching. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. I am going to show you exactly how this deployment unfolded, step by step, from the moment the alert went out to the moment boots hit the ground in the Middle East. But I need you to stay with me until the end, because the part that nobody is talking about, the part that actually determines what happens next in this entire conflict, is not the aircraft, it is not the weapons, it is not even the soldiers. It is a question, one question, that I'm going to answer at the end of this video. And when you hear it, everything you just watched will make complete sense. But first, you need to understand what actually happened, and how fast it happened. Here is something most news coverage completely skips past. Iran did not fire a handful of missiles as a political gesture. This was a coordinated large-scale ballistic missile strike on Israeli territory. And in Washington, every alarm that exists went off at the exact same moment. Now, I need you to understand something about how American military posture actually works, because this context changes everything. The United States does not keep its full combat power sitting pre-positioned in the Middle East at all times. That is logistically impossible and politically explosive. Instead, it maintains what military planners call rapid deployment capability. Forces that can surge into a theater fast, very fast. The question is, how fast is fast? You are about to find out. Because what happened after that alert went out, the speed, the scale, the precision of it, is something that should genuinely stop you in your tracks. The combat alert hit every branch simultaneously. Air Force, Marine Corps, Army units, fighter squadrons, all of them, same signal, same moment. And here is what most people do not understand about what that actually triggers. A combat alert is not an announcement. It is a cascading chain reaction that moves through an entire military structure in minutes. Commanders brief officers, officers brief units. Logistics teams pull equipment manifests. Medical teams prepare deployment kits. Intelligence officers begin assembling target packages. All of this before a single aircraft moves. Then the aircraft move. Marines pulled directly from their barracks, transported immediately to the airfield. No waiting, no delay. They walked up the rear ramps of C-17 Globemaster III transport aircraft, the backbone of American strategic airlift, and took their seats in a cargo bay already loaded with everything a self-sufficient combat force needs to operate independently. Portable generators, ammunition crates, communication systems, medical supplies, and this was just one aircraft at one base. Across multiple airfields simultaneously, the exact same scene was playing out. More C-17S, more Marines, armored vehicles being driven up ramps, MRAPs, mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles, the kind specifically engineered to keep soldiers alive when someone is actively trying to kill them. You do not deploy MRAPs for a show of force. You deploy MRAPs when you genuinely expect your people to be in danger. Let that sink in. Now, before I show you what the fighter preparation looked like, I need to tell you about the soldiers in the hangar. Because that scene, that one specific scene, is the most important thing in this entire story. And I am going to come back to it. But first, the fighters. Because what happened on that airfield changes the entire strategic picture. At a separate airfield, mechanics were already working. Full systems inspections on every aircraft, avionics, radar, wiring, electronics checked panel by panel. Nothing skipped, nothing assumed. Then the weapons teams arrived. Air-to-air missiles mounted on the wingtip rails. Guided bombs hoisted onto the underwing pylons. Each weapon physically wired into the aircraft's electronics. Data link confirmed, arming pins inserted, red safety flags hanging visibly from everyone. Those red flags, remember them. They stay in until the aircraft taxis toward the runway. The moment those pins come out, the weapons are live. Fuel trucks alongside every jet. JP-8 aviation kerosene pumped into tanks while weapons teams finish their work. By the time pilots arrived for their briefings, every single jet on that ramp was fueled, armed, inspected, cleared to fly. But here is the detail that tells you everything about how serious this situation was. These aircraft were not being prepared for one mission. They were being prepared for continuous combat sorties, multiple missions per day, over an extended sustained operation. That is not a response. That is a campaign. Now, I need to go back to the hangar. Because while the aircraft were being armed and fueled, in a hangar on that same base, soldiers were going through their personal gear. Uniforms, boots, hygiene kits. The small personal things that make an indefinite deployment in a foreign country slightly more survivable as a human being. These were not soldiers packing for a scheduled rotation. They had no return date. Nobody gave them a timeline. Nobody could. At dusk, the boarding order came. They formed up in columns outside the hangar, picked up their bags, and walked toward their aircraft in the fading light. I want you to sit with that image for a moment. Because before that soldier picked up that bag, they called someone. They packed something small that mattered to them. They walked toward a plane that was taking them somewhere dangerous for an unknown amount of time. That is the part that never makes the strategic analysis. But that is the part that is most real. Now, I need to answer the question I planted at the beginning. Because everything you just watched, the aircraft, the weapons, the vehicles, the soldiers, all of it points to something. Something that the headlines are not saying clearly enough. And once I say it, you are either going to completely agree with me, or you are going to push back hard in the comments. Either way, you need to hear it. Here is what this deployment actually signals, and I want to be precise about this. First, this is not a defensive posture. The combination of sustained fighter sortie preparation, heavy ground vehicles, and indefinite deployment timelines tells you that American military planners were not positioning for protection. They were positioning for operations. There is a significant difference between those two things. Second, the speed of this response was a message in itself. When the United States moves this fast and this heavy, every government in the Middle East reads it the same way. Iran reads it as a direct warning. Israel reads it as unconditional backing. Every other regional power, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Qatar, Turkey, reads it as a reminder of exactly where American commitment sits when things escalate. Military deployments at this scale are never purely operational. They are geopolitical communication delivered in the language every government understands. Third, and this is the part that matters most long-term, every time America surges this kind of force into the Middle East, it creates obligations that do not simply disappear when the aircraft fly home. The soldiers who stepped off those ramps onto that tarmac are now part of a situation with its own momentum, its own logic, its own potential to escalate in ways that nobody fully controls. And that brings me to the question, the one I told you I would answer. Not, did America respond appropriately? Not, is this deployment justified? The question is, who decides when it ends? Because right now, nobody has a clear answer to that. And in the history of American military engagement in the Middle East, that ambiguity has never ended cheaply. Here is the bottom line. What you witnessed was the most capable military force in human history doing exactly what it was built to do. Moving fast, moving heavy, moving with absolute precision. That capability is real, it is extraordinary, and it is genuinely unlike anything else on Earth. But here is what history keeps trying to tell us. Capability is not strategy. Speed is not wisdom. And the ability to deploy anywhere in the world in hours does not answer the question of what you are actually trying to achieve when you get there. The ramps are closed. The fighters are armed. The soldiers are on the ground. The question of what comes next is the most important question in the world right now, and I am not sure anyone has fully answered it yet. Drop your answer in the comments. Do you think this deployment changes the outcome in the Middle East, or does it deepen the problem? I read every single comment. I respond to the ones that make me think. And if this breakdown gave you something the headlines didn't, share it with one person who needs to understand what is actually happening. More coming. Stay locked in.